This both intrigues me and freaks me out a little bit.
It's manhole explosion season in New York City.
And what a beautiful song. I think that's a Charles Aznavour song.
Chestnut roasting on
right. Manhole season in New York
So
City.
then I start looking that up and I go, well, what's that about? From 2009 to 2018,
Yeah.
there were 4,000 dispatches by the fire department of New York for manhole explosions, and that's among the 45,000 emergency manhole incidents.
So this is when a manhole literally blows off up out of the street into
Explosion.
the air and lands God knows where.
Really? No, really? Really? No, really? Really?
The amazing thing about New York City and what's underground is I didn't realize the sewage pipes used to dump raw sewage directly into the Hudson
You didn't realize that?
until... wait.
Did you stand in?
What year did they stop?
What year
when
did
do you
they
think
stop?
they stopped?
Recently.
Yes.
Yeah, like 2012.
No,
2000
1986.
Yeah.
And by the
Ask
way-
me how I know that. My apartment was a block from the Hudson. I am well aware they used to put raw sewage in the Hudson. And people used to, there was an annual race, swim around Manhattan Island in the Hudson. Yeah, it was lovely.
And a lot of those people got sick, I bet.
I'll tell you something else. No pipes in this. I once went into the boat pond in Central Park for a commercial. I got hepatitis. That was just in the boat pond.
I love New
That's
York.
not even in the Hudson. So yeah.
And
exactly.
the other thing is some of these pipes under New York City
Yeah.
predate the Civil War.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why
Yeah,
wouldn't they?
sure.
Yeah.
Wooden, put in there. What year
Well,
were
I
they
don't
in
think
there?
I don't think the pipe was wooden.
So they have wooden pipes under New York that they had to convert that they started with. Oh yeah.
What's a wooden
And
pipe?
we'll talk about that. We have a guest on, so we wanted to get a guest on who knows what's under cities.
Yeah.
Not just New York, but under cities in Italy. There's all kinds of in France. There's like catacombs with skulls. There's a lot of stuff down there
You got the under guy.
that you don't know. So I got the under guy.
Underdog. Okay.
Don Wildman is joining us. Don is one of TV's most trustworthy and adventurous history enthusiasts. He writes here.
By the way, that's not a big category. That's a very small category.
Already you're going to see, Don,
Yeah.
not a lot of respect, but we love you. You're really something else. He's hosted.
Thank you very much.
Hosted a lot of stuff on the Travel Channel, and a lot of it has to do with history. Mysteries in the Museum, Monumental Mysteries, Greatest Mysteries, Beyond the Unknown, Dark Tales, Mysteries for Even Me,
Right,
my mom's
we get it,
mysteries,
we
my
get
father's mystery of a mystery. So, but Don, you've traveled all over the world, and you've seen it all. Can we welcome to the podcast first of all?
Thank you so much.
to
It's
see you.
really an honor to be here.
No, don't get crazy.
You're a handsome and powerful man, Don, and we appreciate it. So,
All right.
if you can, by the way, how creepy is it just in general going under cities? Is that?
It depends on the space. You know, this basically comes from the fact of the matter that in old times, it was a lot easier to knock something down and bury it instead of, as we do today, carry it away, you know? And so you end up with layers upon layers of civilization in these older areas of the world that are still there, you know, and when you go down and look for them, you find those older versions of whatever city you're standing in. This is a very, very lively subject that goes from, you know, ancient man up until modern times, because the same thing happens today. We build foundations that we build upon. We dig things with tunnel boring machines. It's just this huge realm underground that once you get access to it and start looking around, it just kind of blows your mind about the incredible innovations, the determination of human beings to do what they do and create the structures that they need to do, you know, to build their buildings.
And Don, are you talking about, like, I'll focus on New York for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
So when we talk about an underground city, are we talking about I realize that there are working subway tunnels and there are working,
Well, gas and electric, all that stuff.
right, exactly, pipes.
Right.
And, but
Utilities.
is there also, like, what I find remnants of old New York under New York?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Really?
There's a very famous story from the 1980s. His first name is Bob. I forget his last name. A lovely man who took up a radio contest. There had been a legend about a Masonically built, like the Masons, building a tunnel under Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn. And this tunnel had been dug, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, but it had been sealed off by modern times. And this radio guy, sort of crazy shock jock guy, challenged people, this new world of urban exploration. Go find this tunnel and we'll give you a prize. And this guy named Bob, who was a guy in his 20s at the time, decided to take this upon himself. And he found out where this tunnel was. And it indeed had been buried with regular old sand. But he and his pals dug up a manhole and then started digging, and they found the tunnel. And it had been sealed off with concrete or a cinder block wall in World War I times because of their worries about the German espionage and so forth. But once you broke down that wall, you got through to what was probably 3 blocks long of old train tunnel, like old big brick types of a big stone tunnel that was down there. And at the end of which it had also been collapsed. They suspected that the original train that went to Long Island, out to the farmlands of Long Island, was buried in there as well. There's even rumors of all kinds of crazy stuff back there. It was very much used by Murder Inc. as a place to deposit dead bodies and so forth. And that had been buried that had been covered up until Bob found it. And I went down with him the first time that he was able to go back as an older man. He was very ill, and he knew it was really a funny day. He knew the manhole. He says, I know that all the gas guys, don't worry about it. He brings his own little, cones and circles the cones in the middle of a regular day. And I said, Bob, can we really do this? And it's all being shot verite with my cameraman and everything. And we pry open the manhole, pretending we're gas guys. And we go down into this place he hadn't been in for maybe 20 years. And we climb down, and sure enough, you walk in and there is this enormous tunnel that no one ever goes there. Nobody ever knows is even there. And it was just an incredible thing to see. So that was one of many, many pieces of infrastructure that are in New York. What you mentioned before, Peter, the idea of these wooden pipes, they just dug one up not too long ago. The original Aaron Burr water system.
My God.
That's underneath the financial district still, which is a whole big story.
And Don, the water pipes are gravity, right? So they were all like tilted in a way that they had to run down. How do you do that?
And how long could that run? I mean,
exactly.
It was a big story. It's Aaron Burr, that creepy guy of history, right? And he basically conned.
Wait a minute, my friend Leslie Odom played that role. Come on now.
I'm so sorry. And very well. Aaron Burr got a contract from New York City to deliver fresh water for the first time, and they were suffering in those early days of the 1800s. And he guaranteed that he would deliver 200 some plus outlets through this new system of water that was going to be pumped from the Bronx River. And he got this whole thing contracted, and he built the system, and it was all made of hollowed out wooden logs that were all connected. And that was all down there. And so then he just took the money and ran, because in the contract he had that he could use the money for his own banking purposes. So it was a total con job. Only Amazing. A little bit of the water was ever delivered, not from the Bronx, but from the old source that was there in the East Village.
Did not see that coming from Aaron
Burr. He took that money and he started his own company called the Manhattan Company, and that Manhattan Company eventually becomes Chase Manhattan. So that's the bank.
And
Chase
we're
Manhattan.
out. Oh my God. Oh my God.
There you go.
Aaron
Here's my
Burr.
first reeling.
Wait, and the connection
That's
to,
not
to
in the show.
Fraud and everything else.
None of that is in the Hamilton show.
No.
I would love to see Lin-Manuel rap about
so let's
that.
write the new show called
Let's
Wooden
make
Pipes.
a wooden pipe. Tuck it together with him stucco. Then I don't know, but
Take the
I gotta
money
get
and
the flow.
go.
Yeah, right.
Your water's not there, and either am I. So wow, and that continues today. Is it true there? Okay, I'm going to hit you with a couple of things.
Sure.
The river downstream, underground there, is called Snotsticles because got underground Snotsticles because it's got bacteria. Is that accurate?
Oh God, yeah, and the little stalactites that come from the drips through the ceiling and stuff, all the limestone that comes through. It's gross.
So when you go down, are you in like a hazmat outfit or something?
Yeah, sometimes. It depends on who I'm interviewing and what we're doing and what we got away with. This is the realm of urban explorers who've been doing this forever. There's a guy named Steve, I forget his last name, who's been very famously doing this. He's now a professor of city history and stuff up in, I don't know what city, university, but there have been people who've been, going through this realm forever. and we sort of jumped on their coattails doing this as a TV show. It all started with Istanbul. Istanbul was very famous in the 90s and early aughts because they started building a subway tunnel in Istanbul and modernizing the city. And all they kept doing was having to stop all this construction because they'd run into yet another archaeological amazing find.
Sure.
The famous basilica that they opened up was because of that subway construction. And it was at that time that people that I work with, this great production company, one of whom is a Turk, said, "Hey, this seems like a really good idea for a show." And I said, "Yep." And so off we went. And it turns out the entire world is full of these kinds of mysteries that are revealed as soon as you dig down below and find them. The best of all of them is in Akko. Do you know Akka? It's also called Accra, in northern Israel. It's around Haifa.
Oh, yes, I do actually.
Insane place where you have the original Crusader castle, which is there from like 1200. And it's real, like it's the hospitalier, the French guys, and they've got fleur-de-lis and all that. That was buried by the Ottomans, who took it over, of course, the Muslims who came over, and they buried it in sort of symbolically as well as practically, built their city on top of that. And then the Brits come along later on and build something else on top of that. And so it's this multi-level city that they just started digging up in the 90s. And you can go all the way down. And that's tourism, and that's great, and it's clean and easy. But all around the city are people with their own little basement entrances into this place. So they're very dangerous, but you can literally go into people's basements and then go 2 levels down and be sort of pushing things aside and crawling into the top of a doorway into a 1,200 euro, from the year 1200 into this castle system. It's incredible.
And are these is there a danger to going into these? Are these stable?
Very much so. Yeah, very much so. I was not allowed by that archaeologist that day who took me down. He's the head of the whole thing. He said, "No, don't go in there. You're not going to do it because the gases that get released, the mold and everything else that gets into your system is very dangerous." And it's amazing. It's simply amazing that I did not get sick in some major way from the bat caves that we did and stuff like that. All the guano and things like that, the rats and everything. It's disgusting.
Yeah, Don, you got to start spending some time above ground. So let's finish with New York real quick. Mole people.
Yeah.
I've heard stories about mole people. I read about a guy who met the mole people and the woman who was living down there for 28 years. And I hear from other people, it's total BS. It doesn't exist. So yes.
To a degree, I think it does. I think it wasn't as sensational as that was reported to be. I mean, what that was about was really like Times Square and the unused tunnels of the subway system. There's a lot of those. I mean, down in the Village, there's that new, the underground version of the High Line is being developed into a park, where they use the original subway tunnel down by City Hall and stuff. And I don't even know how far along that is, but it's a great idea. But there are all kinds of tunnels that never get used again. I've toured a lot of them up in Boston, for example. The Boston subway, the T system has a ton of dead-end tunnels that are just there for storage and stuff. And, you can imagine how that works. They dig these things and then say, "Oh, never mind, we're not going that way." And that space just doesn't get attended to. A lot of these public spaces, and I mean public by, back into kingdoms and so forth, are just there because public money was available to do them, but then it runs out. And so nobody goes down there ever again until somebody finds it and discovers it and does a television show on it.
And what about sunken boat? I mean, the ground shifts, things sink, things
Correct.
dry up. I hear there are 17th century boats underground. I think under New York, there was a mirrored room that they found somewhere underground.
They found, when they did the original excavation for the first foundation of the World Trade Center, they found boats down there because that had been the original, shoreline. So much of Manhattan shoreline is backfill. It's all filled in as recently as the 70s, I guess. But so you're going to find inevitably things down there that are from the early Dutch days and all that kind of stuff.
Well, wait a minute.
It's great.
Don, that's interesting. So I did not know that about the actual shoreline of New York. New York Island has been enhanced through man-made procedures.
Oh my God, there used to be a beach, on where the World Trade Center is, or that whole, what's it called? The
Freedom Plaza,
that whole area where American Express used to be and all that.
Yeah.
That's all filled in. That's an extended shoreline. And so the original shoreline is under where the World Trade Center was sitting, where Freedom Tower, I guess, is. And and so all that is extended.
So is that a viable technology?
Oh yeah,
I'm putting the cart before the horse. All the reports is that the water levels are rising around Manhattan, and that particularly lower Manhattan is in grave danger of being underwater in the next decade to two. Do we have the technology to keep raising sort of the structure of the lower part of the island to combat
Of course.
that?
It's just money. That's where the government comes in, and how much are they going to spend to raise that shoreline even more than they already did. You go to Prague, for example. You walk around Prague, the Jewish quarter of Prague, which dates back to I forget the dates now, is 12 feet higher than the original city. And you can go into many, many buildings down there and find where they actually lifted up the city. You stand next to the Tiber River in Rome. Everybody walks along that river. Well, that huge wall behind you is the raised city. It's 30 feet high. So that new city, the modern city, sits on top of that whole underground, which is the original spaces of each level of that city when they raised it higher and higher. That's typically what is done. It's more of a practical measure just for flood control, mostly, of those old cities, because they were constantly getting flooded out. So of course that's what they would do. But that's an old technique for human societies, just to raise the level of ground.
And they cannot do that to a place like Venice, Italy, because there is no ground. It's like a floating structure, right?
Yeah, there's just so much water. I mean, so much. It's just open water. That's the whole idea. They didn't have streets; they just had canals, and so. Right. It's a different kind of challenge, I think.
Don, we're also seeing now across the country these major structures, big buildings that are sinking, buildings that are tilting, buildings that are sinking. What's and with your knowledge of what's under stuff, you go, there are catacombs under there. There's movable ground. There's a fault line. I would get out of apartment 3C now.
I know.
I mean, this is happening all the time. I start researching where they are, and you go, "Oh wow, this is not a one-off."
Where are you thinking of? What's the
one
the
they said even in the marina out here, they're concerned about some of those buildings starting to sink. The one that they had to knock down, and the ones next to them in Florida, there's some, and because of rising sea levels, it's also altering even inland what's going on.
My wife and I just bought an 1800s cottage on Martha's Vineyard that the engineer just explained to me that the foundation is rotting away and that's why the porch is tilting that way, downward. And I said, what do you mean it's rotting away? And he said, well, that's every building in the world eventually that happens to. So that's why you have to go under and re-pour foundations every 100 years or so. So it happens to everything. It's just a matter of time.
So
why do I always own it when it's time for that?
I know. Why didn't I do the right investigation?
Yeah, by the way, you of all people, don't you go under the house before you're done?
My inspector said, good to go. And
I know, but this man spends half his life underground. You would think
that
would be
you
the
first
place.
I would have
He looks in the attic. Don looks in the attic, and they go there.
It doesn't have a basement. That's the problem.
So of all the cities, and I know this is tough because I'm looking at the list, and it's Boston, Jerusalem, Ho Chi Minh City, Rome, L.A. What was the most eye-opening event where you went down?
I would tell you that my favorite story of underground is Ethiopia. I really learned so much from it and had an incredible cultural experience going there. It wasn't dangerous then. It's now dangerous to go to where we went to because there's been a huge war there over the last couple of years. But it's a place called Tigray. And Tigray is the northernmost province of Ethiopia, Ethiopia being an amazing country that everyone should try to get to in their lifetimes. It's an incredible place. But Tigray is on your way to Egypt. It's that whole kind of historical world up there. And the Tigrayans, like the Egyptians, were so good with stone, obviously. And this place becomes very interesting, actually, because of Christianity. It's a weird thing, but the Ethiopian Orthodox Church is one of the most intense fundamentalist churches in the world. And that's because of the 9 saints, they were called. The 9 saints were these Christian prophets who came down from, or missionaries, I guess, who came down from the Eastern Orthodox realm of Christianity after the treaty or the Nicene was done, or the Chalcedon, the Council of Chalcedon. That's what I'm thinking of. I think 400. And there was a big conflict in that early time of Christianity. Was Jesus Christ a divine God from the beginning, or was he a man who became divine? It sounds like who cares at this point, but back then it was really important. And so the church up above, up in Turkey, Istanbul, Constantinople, went with the duophysite, I think it's called. And the monophysites had to go away. And so they went down to Ethiopia, a lot of them. And they started what was called the rock-carved churches. And these are in places like Lalibela and further north into Tigray. They are incredibly complicated engineering that's done from carving the rock that's underground. And there's in Lalibela, this is a World Heritage Site, very famous. There's 11 rock-carved churches that will blow your socks off as you walk around inside of them. And they're used. This is an active religious site. People make pilgrimages to this place. But literally below ground level, you're seeing a 2-story tall building that is intricately carved inside and out of the stone that was there. Only once. Like they had to make it perfect from the top to the bottom as they went. They didn't there's no way to do it other than that. And you just can't believe what you're seeing. It's so astonishing that when we did this, I don't know, it was 2008, I guess it was. I thought the next year there would be neon signs and Americans would be flying over. I just couldn't, I still can't believe that I tell people this and they don't know about it. It's the most gobsmacking place I've ever been in my life.
Wow. I just want to talk to Peter for a second. Don, take a sip of coffee or something if you like.
Okay.
Did you hear the terms and the dates this guy's throwing out? This guy's there. I think he read some of those books behind him.
This stuff.
I thought you just got a TV guy, like a front man, a beard. I didn't know you got like a real guy. This is a real guy.
He actually leaves his house.
This is not like Mike Rowe, who just dabbles, milks a horse for a second.
Dana says to you, "Can you go to Ralph's?" And you go, "Really? I got to go."
Yeah, I got to go. Right? Yeah, he's going down to places where no one should go. And learning terms and phrases and dates.
Would you go down?
I couldn't. Would I go down? Would I go down there? I don't know. I'm fascinated. Yeah, I would. I actually am fascinated. I went through, you probably know this tunnel. There's some sort of ancient aqueduct in Jerusalem, I believe it is, that is still functioning today, and you can tour through it, you can walk through it.
City of David.
Oh, my God.
The City of David Aqueduct. I'm going to act like I know now.
Yeah, That's where you get your carbonated water.
Right, and they got a toll booth there. The woman takes the thing. Yeah,
toll
booth, exactly.
But that tunnel goes out into the famous pond where apparently Jesus, did one of his miracles. And it was also near where Solomon was anointed, on the rock that he was anointed on. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah.
You know what? I get nervous in the Budapest subway, so I can't even imagine going where you went. And I'm looking at you going, you're probably one of the luckiest guys that you take on those challenges because you've gone just about everywhere. I got to ask you a lesser. Okay, so this is almost embarrassing to ask, but I got to get it out of the way. All of these cities always do, especially New York, alligators or crocodiles are below. Have you ever seen in any city, because it's always a kid threw out the thing, flushed it, and now they're down there. Ever see one?
No,
there
never.
You go. I just had to get
they don't exist.
The definitive.
There are, of course, those stories of people's pythons and all that, but I have not myself seen one. I did wrestle an alligator for another show that I did, but that's another story.
Whoa. Hold on a second.
You alone or you and a couple of guys? Was it a tag team?
And we were on a hobby. You were just sitting and said, you know what, honey?
It was the whole thing.
We're having lunch. Let me just go wrestle. I'll be back in 20. How did that happen?
It was an alligator wrestling, quote unquote, place, down in outside of Miami, where you can go and do it yourself if you want. But
and by the way, insurance forms to fill out, and is it a one-armed guy who says, "Come on in"?
Yes, we had a very expensive insurance form, as a matter of fact.
So wait, do they say, "There's your"? It's just like a rodeo. You go, "Okay, give me $20. There's your alligator. Good luck. We'll see you later."
No, you can't do it. But if you were doing a television show that promoted them, they would help you figure out how to do it. I sat on the back of an alligator, and I carefully grasped his snout, holding his mouth shut. This was a 12-foot alligator, I suppose. And then I slowly bent it backwards and I kissed it on the lips and then put it back. And that was the stunt. And it was observed and advised upon by a so-called expert.
Yeah, and you know what happens when I do that with an expert? Yeah. Something bad happens. And every time I've ever tried anything, parasailing, anything in my life, here's what I hear.
Yes.
Never saw that happen before.
Right. Yeah.
And he
by the
opens them
way,
up. Steve Irwin is no longer with us.
I take back all the nice things I said about the erudite because this guy thinks alligators have lips.
Dude,
I'm just
going underground is like nothing for him.
Right.
He's kissing alligators.
But he thinks they have lips. So,
well, how about can I kiss it on the top of the head? You know what always amazes me about those? Like out here, you go to a carnival, and they have the ride is this big and insurance and all that. But in Florida, it's one of those alligator wrestling places. That's the most insane thing you can do. You're just begging for problems at that point.
There's a lot of that in Florida, you know.
Oh, that's probably that's in a retirement community, by the way, which is really odd.
Don, I want to go. I want to get back to just one other thing because we touched on it briefly, but I don't know that I heard an absolute answer. So, are there segments of a population that are living in these spaces either because they're homeless or they're?
No, I'm glad you asked. Over in Turkey, in the center part of Turkey is a place called Cappadocia. Very famous. I mean, this place you can take a balloon ride in the morning. It's a big tourism area. But the ferry towers, they call them, are creations due to erosion. It's a long story, but they're amazingly pointed places with that are easily dug out by hand. I mean, not easily, but you can do it. And so over centuries, they have dug these places out, and they're sort of hollowed out, and they were traditionally homes for people to live in. Over time, they've been squatted in and sort of civilized as a modern place. People have stoves and stuff like that in them, and it's very much not the place you want to live, in our lives, but it is a place of shelter and warmth for people, and I've seen it all over the place. It's the
sort
equivalent
of like in subway tunnels as well.
Yeah, the equivalent of any kind of putting a tent next to the highway ramp or something like that. But in this case, it's an ancient shelter that was used for people like that. Of course, nobody really wants to live like that. But
to that end, because Peter and I are probably going to discuss this a little bit on later. Do you see a future where instead of building up, we start building down or reclaiming these spaces?
Already happening.
Right,
I mean, back to New York for a moment. One of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life is the Second Avenue subway tunnel being built. That Lexington Avenue, the new one that they did over here. And we were in that in maybe 2012 or something. It was just when it was just kind of starting out. Really fascinating. Just as a little sidebar, there are major engineering jobs always being done in the world somewhere. Big stuff. And there's this little subculture of engineering world of superstar people who are hired up to do these things. And you go to any one of these sites, they could be rebuilding a dam in Tennessee or something over in Luxembourg. It can be anywhere in the world, and you'll find some version of the same crowd. And there's Michael so-and-so from Romania. Everybody knows he's the number one guy. And so there was a Romanian guy running the crew that was digging in New York because he's the number one guy. And he just goes around and does these big, sexy, they negotiate huge contracts for themselves. So that dig it's underneath of Grand Central. It's yet to be opened, which is extraordinary because it's been going on forever. And it's the connecting facility for Long Island Railroad. It was always meant to be there. Long Island Railroad, if you want to go to Long Island, you get on it under Penn Station, which is on the west side of Manhattan. It makes no sense. So a huge amount of working New York goes down into Penn Station every day with 1 billion people under there and gets on their LIRR train and goes out to Long Island. There's a huge amount of lost time in this New York world. So the idea was to open up a version of that on the east side, the way it was intended to be, but they never got around to doing it. They have done that. They've dug that tunnel out. And so soon you'll be able to get that same train. It'll come right across town from Penn Station. Right. You'll pick it up in Grand Central and go. That dig was so wild because it was vast. And you got to it, you could still get to it from a construction door on the eastern side of Grand Central Terminal down below. And you'd walk in and you're suddenly into this world that you just had no idea was even there. You put on your boots they give you, you sign your little form and off you go. And you're walking down into unused tunnels under Grand Central, of which, of course, there are many. And then you go deeper and you get deeper and you deeper and you're down this unbelievable place that's hundreds of feet below that they are just creating this world. So you see, to answer your question, I'm so sorry, the vastness of the spaces that are able to be created below ground. it's a no-brainer that that's where this all goes to when climate becomes too difficult, and when congestion is too much and the population grows even more. It will be worldwide. It will be more easily done than it is now. Elon Musk is already talking about building highways underground. Of course you can do it. The tunnel boring machine is a well-trod territory now. It's engineering that works all over the place, and we can talk about that. It's very heartening, actually, to me, because it's a really doable technology that works on a pretty fast basis.
Don, how far down? How far down? You know, I've heard that in New York it goes as far as the Chrysler Building is up. It goes that far down.
Yeah, I don't know about exactly, but I mean, it's definitely more than you would ever imagine. You know, there's spaces way down there that are incredible, and those are old ones. Those are 1940s and so forth that were dug out for World War II. And stuff, it's just endless. But the new technology is mostly tunnel boring machines that work. If you stand on, first of all, I'll explain. There's a big rotating blade that's bigger than you are tall. It's a two people tall, and it's circular, and it turns and it pushes through the earth, and it literally carves as it goes, and that material is carried out by a conveyor belt. The general machines I've been on have been 100 to more feet long. And so you're seeing all that dirt go away as you're standing there. You're also watching the wall move. I mean, that's literally how fast this thing goes. Inches are moving past you at any kind of moment. And after a day, they can do 5 feet a day. And so it takes, weeks only to dig a huge tunnel. And so that is happening all over the world, and already has in other ways. The the sand hogs have been doing it under New York for a century or more. So
and yes, it doesn't destabilize the ground above, and
not at all. In fact, that is not even a factor, because nothing that deep matters, and also it's circular, so that's a perfectly
right,
just geometrically or whatever physically it works.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, before we go. The Steven Spielberg movies, they always find these tunnels with skulls and stuff. And in catacombs and a lot of skeletons, miles of skeletons. There are tunnels like that, correct?
Oh, my God, yes, everywhere. I mean, pre-Columbian stuff all around in South America, you'll find all kinds of burial sites underground. And you realize I don't go to these places unless I'm working. The average person isn't going to want to spend a lot of effort and time and money to find out of the way places. So out of the way places exist everywhere, and they're barely visited but by locals. So if you go, like I have, to these places, you're astonished at how much stuff exists in these caves and on shelves. And there's another skull. You kind of get bored of it, frankly, because there's just so much. And you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of years of people just throwing stuff away and putting it away or burying it or anything like that. It's both moving and like, oh God, we've been here for a while.
And Moscow, Don? Moscow, were you welcomed underground, or was that tough to do?
Moscow was interesting. This was the 2008, so we were not, doing what we are doing now in terms of, we were getting along in those days. Nonetheless, there was still a lot of obvious Cold War tension in the air. Several experiences, like we did Ukraine, which had a lot of the Russian population against us there, and we were just trying to tell heroic stories about Soviets in World War II. I'll tell you, it's another one of those things that every American should see is the Moscow subway system. It's just amazing, and the complete opposite of the New York subway system. It's beautiful, it's clean, it's extraordinary and grand. It has sculptures and art, and it just blows your mind. And and it works, it's incredible.
Yeah, but they don't have Broadway. They don't have Broadway, Don.
They don't have Broadway. Yeah. I know where you're going, and I feel the same way. There's a human quality to the New York City subway, which I really like.
Oh, it's human.
Yeah, I bet you don't see somebody emptying their nose out on the Moscow subway like I did in New York.
It is
every time.
It's painted by human. Yeah.
I didn't realize living in Philadelphia that when you go to New York and take a subway, that you don't use tissues. You just hold one nostril.
Oh, sure.
And you just empty out your nose away. And nobody looks. Everybody goes,
why would you? Sure.
Wow.
Yeah. Sure. They also don't have bathrooms on the cars, so there's a space between the cars. I've seen it.
Wow.
I've seen it done.
Then there's the Philadelphia subway system.
Hey. Yeah, okay, before you go, what's under Philly, my hometown?
Not too much.
Good.
You got the old city, And then, I did the water system. I will tell you that the Schuylkill underneath of the underneath the art museum, right
Yep,
behind
yep.
there, one of the original water systems of the world of America, and a real product of that a colonial engineering. Ben Franklin. I'm named for Ben Franklin. My middle name is Franklin, so
Oh,
I'm very proud of Philly in those regards. I'm even Quaker, believe it or not.
there you go.
Ah.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Hey Don, what's the one you haven't gotten to that you want to get to?
You know what? I haven't done Brazil enough. There's a ton of stuff in Brazil that's extraordinary, and in general, South America. I think that's Argentina, all of that area. For some reason, we never really got down to doing enough of that stuff.
Yeah.
We did a bit in Peru, which scratched the surface, no pun intended. It was one of the most leading Stanford guy, a Stanford archaeologist. That's one of my favorite parts of the job is that I run into these scientists who have been working for, their entire careers and they're legends in their world. And there they are, up to their gills in whatever project they're doing. And nobody ever knows they're there except their students, their graduate students. And suddenly you meet this man who is revered in his world and knows everything about everything. It's incredible. If you have a minute more, I need to tell you the story about what this one archaeologist found in northern Peru.
Yeah.
If you go to Peru, you generally go to the southern part of Peru. That's the Inca Trail. That's all the big glamorous Machu Picchu and all that sort of thing. The northern part of Peru is less known, and that's the Chimu civilization. And it's a equally grand, amazing thing. I can't remember the dates, but it's AD or whatever. It's the Common Era, and it was where an archaeologist who was working there, a Peruvian, was called by a pizzeria owner in this beachside surfing town a few years ago and said, we're finding bones in this empty lot. My kids keep coming back with them, and my dog brought back a skull. I think there's something over there. And this archaeologist was very busy on his own work down the road, just a mile down the road on this major excavation. And he ignored the call for 3 different calls. He told me the story as we did this on TV. And so we met him in this town, and he walked me to that vacant lot, which is where he discovered the largest child sacrifice in the world and in history that has ever been discovered. Some 200 plus children, I think it was, who had been all killed in one particular event. And the reason that they had been sacrificed was because there had been a huge amount of rain had come in, and they know this from the flooding and from the geology that they were able to excavate, and that this sacrificial event happened because the political elite had to prove to the common people that they were going to do something about this terrible suffering that they were all doing. All the crops were being killed and everything else. So they pooled all these kids from around the whole region and came in and slaughtered them in one fell swoop. And so you find all these holes in the ground and all these bodies, one after another, over this whole period of time. That is like unbelievable in this world to go into and see and understand how ancient man dealt with things.
Yep.
But
Wow.
but even practically, politically, and it's a fascinating historical understanding of mankind through the underground, through the spaces below.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
I could talk and talk about this. I'm sorry.
No, it's fascinating. And you know what? I love the best about you.
Are thrilled to have this discussion with you.
You're invited to every dinner party we ever have in our lives because everyone will shut up and just think you're the most interesting. No, but the funniest thing is when we go back to how we started the interview, of course he's doing it in the basement of his home.
Yeah.
That's where he feels most comfortable.
But it's also, it just makes me think, I can't remember who I was talking to who said that they didn't want to, they had the opportunity to buy a piece of property near a cemetery, and they said, I don't want to do that. I mean, I don't want to live where there's bodies buried. I went, planet Earth is a cemetery.
Yes,
we are all building on the bones of, the notion that if we just tunnel down a little bit. I mean, I'm fascinated because you were talking about we probably have to do some foundation work on my house. And I'd love to know what's 10 feet down under my house. I bet there's some really cool stuff down there.
I really thought what Jason was going to do was say, have Don on, because I really need to know who recommends to do the work. That's all this interview's
Let's
about.
see how the main house comes out first. Then we'll talk about his recommendations.
Don, you are a joy. You're really a joy, man. Your life must be... Are you on the move all the time, or does the family go, it's enough with the underground stuff and the museums?
Now I'm podcasting like you. I'm doing my underground in my basement like this. But no, it's a pause right now. I'm pitching a new series about this. I really believe in it. it's an endlessly fascinating thing that there's way more of than I can even tell you to explore. So,
you know what? You just ended
if
with
the series ever takes celebrities, I know Peter would love to go. So
there you go.
Right?
I'm going down. I'm going down.
No, I would go too.
The amazing thing is, and it's funny you ended with that story, even though it's chilling. When we got you on, I wanted you because of what's underground and where you've been and what you've seen. But you hit us with that as the last story, and you go, oh, wow, peeling away the layers underground also shows you decisions people made, the politics of the time, the religion of the time, and what they did, and how they lived, and it tells you our history because you don't know our history. You're apt to repeat it. So it's a really unique perspective on our history.
Sorry for the downer story.
No. It
that's
opens
right.
a
In
whole...
our textbooks in certain parts of the country, we'll just erase that. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Yeah, it doesn't exist. You don't exist, Don. You were never here, as if you were never here. Wow.
Such a pleasure to meet you, man. Thank you so much. All right.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take
Terrific.
care. Well, that was
I
fascinating.
didn't care for this.
That was fascinating.
I'm kidding. He is
he's
fascinating, and all of his stories are based on history, which makes it even that more interesting. We'll get to Guggenheim in a minute, but what's interesting is we started talking about the future. And I started, when I do these, we research, we start at a place and usually end up somewhere related to, but bigger. And one of the headlines is "The Only Way is Down," why underground urban development is happening. And they're doing it a lot of places.
I saw the episode of Star Trek where there were people living underground,
You always go to Star
and there
Trek.
were people living in the clouds. Nobody could live on the surface. They found a way to live in the clouds, and the people underground were not faring well. They wanted to be on the clouds.
Well, isn't that the time machine, Morlock and Elu, that they live in, the
Sure,
whistle blows,
absolutely.
and they come up with those?
Yes,
Yeah.
all the underground people, they've never been happy down there.
Well,
and you know why? You can't get reception. You can't get reception.
You're constantly going.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I'm trying to watch the finale of American Idol.
Where are you going to walk the dog? Where is that going to go?
Good point. Good
Right?
point. Yes.
Take the dog out. There is no out. There's only
And you got to
more.
go up for
right. Right.
My dog
Yeah.
goes out every hour.
And you never see. No, seriously though. But what do they do for sunlight? We can't live without.
There are some
sunlight.
that they actually tunnel down where it's like a tube.
Oh, it's like the solar tube I have in my
Like the
shower?
solar tube you have in your shower. I'm serious. They do that. That is one of the problems. But yeah.
I'm not getting a tan under the solar tube.
So you know what I wanted to ask?
Am I getting my vitamin D in the solar tube? If I stand there rinsing,
I think
can
you
I say, honey, I got to
by the way-
rinse another minute. I'm getting my vitamin D from the
I
solar
wanted
tube.
to do a solar tube in my house. Does that work or does it leak when it
It
rains?
doesn't leak. No, we have two of them,
And it
they're
really
actually-
does. It really does it.
I got to tell you, it lights up a room, man.
Can they do that with a solar tube that opens up to get air?
I'm not sure. You'd
gotta
have
find-
to,
I
you'd
gotta
have to
find
do
that
your
out.
own investigation.
So
much like Don Wildman. Why do I have to know? Investigate. Go make a call. I'm working on foundation stuff. You want me to know?
So before we go and get Guggenheim
my
on,
God.
the one thing I didn't talk about is New York City has about 2 million rats.
There we go. That's what we didn't talk about. He's
So
going down in
yeah.
these places. I know there's 2 million rats down there because
Great.
there's 1 million rats on the
Bummer.
surface of New York City.
But New York City is not the number one city.
No.
Number
That's
one city, if you're listening, you can be proud. Number one, Boston. You're
Boston's
number one.
strong.
Number two, Philadelphia.
There
number
you
two.
go.
Number three,
Yeah.
New York City. But you
Sure.
have a sense of what to do with the rats that was unique.
If we can teach a goldfish to drive, we can teach rats
to do anything.
nannies, right?
Pushing a carriage.
Push a carriage, of course. They can push a
guess
carriage,
what?
Right?
Guess what?
What?
I just ordered pizza.
Right?
Guess who's delivering
Pizza
it?
delivery.
That's-
There you go.
Of course,
right?
a third of it's eaten. but
Traffic cops, we don't need people standing
The
there.
only
That's
thing I would
dangerous.
tell you is-
these rats can find a landmine out in the field. You don't think they can read a light? They come this way.
The only
stop,
thing I tell
slow
you about
down,
rats, the only thing
crossing
that-
guard, school bus driver. Let's put them to work.
Here's the one thing that knocks you out there.
Yeah, what's
they're
that?
not smart enough to avoid being in laboratories and having themselves dissected. So
Oh.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there we go.
You know what they are smart enough to do? Apply to PETA for that comment.
there you go.
There you
Guggenheim, what do we got? Any put the rats to work would be a unique plan. Mr.
Right?
Czar.
Put them to work.
David?
There you go. Yeah. A few things. Number one, the original Manhattan shoreline at the southern tip of the island was at the Pearl Street area, about 3 blocks inland.
I
from
know that street.
The end.
Wow,
Yes.
really? No,
that's-
really.
Also, places to wrestle gators while.
How do you do that? Really? How do you do that?
First of all, the man is in
Well-
Florida. If anyone's going to know the
yeah,
answer to
David,
this
by the way,
question.
he's 550 feet from one.
Yeah, I do some moonlighting, but I didn't want to get into that today. But traditionally, the gator wrestling has been a spectator activity, but there is a place called Gators Reptile Park where you could actually get in there for $100 and wrestle a gator.
Worth every penny.
Strangely enough, though, it's in Colorado. So
all right.
You know what I always wonder about with those? When you read that the guy went on a cruise with his wife and may have murdered or pushed her over. This is a perfect place to take your spouse. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. I bought you 5 tickets.
Another 100.
Just all day long. Rubber.
You know what? Here's 200. Put 2 alligators.
Have a great time. Forget the hour. I'm buying the 2 hours.
Tag team. It's wrestling tag team. Right.
We already pet dolphins. Let's do this.
Sure.
Wow. So thank you. Anything else we want to? Oh, follow Jason. Do our
yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. If you like to follow us specifically, you can go to our website, reallynoreally.com. You can leave us a really of your very own, something that makes you say really no really. If we use it on the show, we'll mention your name and maybe send you a hat.
Get you something like that.
What do you like
house.
that?
How about that?
Please listen. We drop new episodes every Tuesday. You can go to the iHeart app, the Apple app, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you follow us on YouTube, and we hope you do, please remember to like and subscribe, and we will be back next Tuesday with a brand new episode. I can't wait to see you then.
Of Really No Really.
Of Really No Really. Thanks, David. Thanks, Lori. Thank you.